Scootaloo's Painful Secret, Chapter 1, Remembering. The first time was when she was 5 years old. She had talked back to her mother, and she'd yanked on her right foreleg so hard it was amazing it hadn't come out of its socket. Her mother's name was Cold Heart, her father, Cloud Dancer. Her mother was a yellow Pegasus with a frozen heart for a cutie mark, as her father was a gray Pegasus with a cloud as a cutie mark. Her mother has always been rough with her, no matter what she'd be doing. If she brushed her mane, she pulled it. If she gave her a bath, she turned the faucet on full blast and stuck her tiny head under it, causing her to shriek from the pain of the strong current hitting her head and all the loud noise. When Scootaloo was a baby, she was like a new toy for her mother to play with. When she reached school age, it was like her mother got tired of her new toy, and mostly started leaving her for her father to raise. Except, of course, when she was in a bad mood and needed to take it out on some pony, that pony would be Scootaloo. Scootaloo would be yelled at, called names, put down, slapped across the face, spanked, and punished when she didn't even deserve it. Her father, while he shielded her mom from the abuse getting too bad, also enabled her mother by defending her and making excuses for her actions. Her mother's abuse was mostly verbal and emotional. Scootaloo's self-esteem was shot. She felt useless and worthless, and her wings being too small for her to fly properly just made her feel even worse. At first, she blamed herself, thought that maybe if she tried harder to be a better daughter, then maybe her mother would love her more. As she got older, however, she gradually began to realize that it was her mother who had the problem, not her, and she began to hate and resent her as much as she feared her. "I wish I'd never had you," her mother would say cruelly. Or perhaps she'd call her stupid, spoiled brat. If Scootaloo tried to stand up for herself, she was punished. If she even complained that something wasn't fair, she was punished. If she slammed a door in anger or frustration, she was punished. At times, Scootaloo hated her life and wished she was dead. Other times, she wished her mother was dead. Scootaloo was 8 years old now, and the abuse had continued. Her father had always told her that what went on at home was no pony else's business. But he longed to tell someone. Her heart hurt too much. "Hey, Scootaloo! Eartha Scootaloo!" What?" She looked at Sweetie Belle blankly. "I said, do you have any ideas for today?" "Yeah," added Apple Bloom. "It's time to go crusading." Scootaloo blinked and looked around at their clubhouse. She'd been so lost in thought she'd forgotten they were at a meeting. Maybe skating?" "Sure! Cutie Mark Crusaders! Skaters! Yay!" The others cheered. Scootaloo smiled weakly and followed her friends. She spent as much time with them and at the clubhouse as possible, so she wouldn't have to go home and deal with her family. Once she tried to tell her aunt and uncle what her mother did to her, but to her shock and sadness, they'd taken her mother's side and told her she deserved how she was treated. She hadn't dared to tell anyone else again. If her own family wouldn't help her, who would? She looked up at the sky in time to see Rainbow Dash streak across it. Maybe she could tell the person she looked up to most, but what if she said it was her own fault too? She didn't think she could bear that. Just that morning, her mother had slapped her and left a red mark on her cheek. Her friends had asked about it, but she told them she banged it on her scooter. She didn't like lying to her friends, but she was afraid of their reactions. For 3 years now she'd kept this deep, dark secret. Would she ever get the courage to tell anyone again? When Scootaloo went home that evening, she knew right away she was in trouble. She could hear her mother yelling before she even went outside. Apparently, the plumbing was backed up. "You!" her mother yelled as soon as she saw her. "You put too much toilet paper and backed up the system, didn't you?" "I didn't," Scootaloo insisted, backing up nervously. "It's not my fault." "I don't believe you, you little liar!" Her mother grabbed her and started spanking her hard and fast. "Ow, Mom, no, I didn't do anything!" Scootaloo sobbed. Go to your room! Her mother screamed at her, and Scootaloo fled. For a long time, Scootaloo cried in the darkness, her flank and heart hurting equally. Why did her mother hate her so much? The next day, the plumber told her parents that their tree roots were interfering with the pipes. Scootaloo glared at her mother, but she never apologized. Not that it would matter if she did. The few times her mother did say she was sorry, she'd always do it again in a few days. "I'm sorry Mom punished you when you didn't deserve it," her father said. "But she's been going through a hard time at work." Scootaloo scowled at her father. There were times when she hated him, just as much as she hated her mother. There were no good excuses for her actions against her. None. And yet, despite all the pain, there was a part of her that yearned for a mother's approval, that desperately wanted her love. Her mother would tell her because of her job that she'd have much time for her. Yet her mother had plenty of time to go out with her mare friends. Scootaloo was old enough now to recognize a hypocrite when she saw one. Even though she didn't know the actual meaning of the word, her mother was a selfish, cruel, abusive, and a tyrant. She couldn't wait to grow up and get away from her. She feared her as much as she hated her. Why didn't her father divorce her mother and send her away? Her mother was just as mean to her father as she was to her, except she never hit him. She would, however, yell at him and insult him just like he did Scootaloo. On the outside, Scootaloo pretended to be brave and daring just like Rainbow Dash, but on the inside, she was a scared and hurtin' little filly. Later, Scootaloo looked out her window and made the same wish on a star that she made every night, that her mother would change and become kind and loving. It was a habit to her by now. Every night she would wish, but her wish would never come true. Chapter 2. Because of You. When Scootaloo needed help with her homework, she had to stay after school and get it from Miss Cheerilee. That one time her mother had tried to help her was a disaster. When she hadn't understood it right away, she had yelled at her and made her feel stupid. When Scootaloo had ended up clenching the pencil so tightly in her anger that it had broken, her mother had hit her and made her cry. Her father wasn't smart enough to be any of help, so she would stay after school when needed. Miss Cheerilee was kind and patient. She wished her teacher was her mother instead. She bet Miss Cheerilee would never hit her. She was glad it was Friday. Whenever she could, she slept over at Apple Bloom's or Sweetie Belle's, and tonight they were all going to have a sleepover in their clubhouse. It would be a relief to get away from her family for the night. Scootaloo had a good time with her friends, playing games and telling scary stories till they all eventually got tired enough to fall asleep. Asleep, Scootaloo dreamed about the worst thing her mother had ever done to her. When she was 6, they got a dog from the pound. Her name was Peaches, and she was beautiful, white, with big brown eyes. Scootaloo had adored her from the start. Unfortunately, what they didn't know was that Peaches was pregnant. The dog had her puppies right on Scootaloo's bed when she was sleeping. Scootaloo was overjoyed with the wonder of it all. Her mother made sure she saw the pups and was happy and excited about them. Then, her mother decided the pups were too much trouble and that she was going to have them put her down. Scootaloo begged her mother not to and was issued a cruel ultimatum. The puppies or Peaches? Of course, she chose her new best friend. It was hard to tell who cried more in their own way, Scootaloo or Peaches, who whined loudly for 7 days. A year later, Peaches started to get sick. Scootaloo's mother promised that if she had to be put down, she could be there to say goodbye. But she lied. She had sick Peaches put to sleep while Scootaloo was at school. Scootaloo had never cried so much in her entire life. That was when she learned that her mother was a liar. She never forgave her, and she never would. Scootaloo woke up crying from the dream and wiped her tears away. Luckily her friends didn't wake up, but it was a long time before she was able to fall back to sleep. Scootaloo managed to stay away from home all weekend, but unfortunately, on Monday afternoon, after school, she had to go home. Her mother had a bad day of work as usual, and she took it out on Scootaloo. After dinner, Scootaloo hurried to her room and got in bed so her mother wouldn't have any excuse to yell at her any more. With Scootaloo out of the way, her mother started screaming at her father. Tears fell down her face, and she put her hooves over her ears to try drown it. Things didn't quiet until her parents went to bed. Scootaloo crept to her window to make her usual wish in the brightest star she could see. Please make my mom love me, and please make her a better pony. Staring out the window, her heart filled with so much sadness that she had to let it out somehow, and she began to sing. Chapter 3. Mixed Signals. Cold Heart wasn't always cruel to her daughter. Sometimes, for a period of time, she'd actually be quite nice to her. She'd read her stories at bedtime, even giving each character a different voice. She'd take her out to lunch. She'd give her something nice after they had a particularly nasty argument. All this was confusing to Scootaloo. Sometimes, just as she thought her mother was starting to change, she'd go back to being nasty again. Each time, it caught her off guard and broke her heart. And of course, there was plenty of times she promised to take her somewhere, and then changed her mind at the last minute. Her life was full of excuses, lies, and broken promises. Scootaloo sighed at the thought of that this morning, and she accidentally bumped into her dresser, causing one of her Runables figurines to topple off and fall to the floor, breaking on impact. Oh no! She looked down at it in dismay, and then her bedroom door was flung open by her father. What was that crash? He demanded, before he spotted the figurine, his eyes narrowing. Scootaloo, what did I tell you about being more careful with your things? It was an accident, Dad. I just accidentally bumped. I don't want to hear it. Her father left the room, and Scootaloo's lower limb trembled. She was used to her mother being rough on her, but her father was usually kind to her. Suddenly, her father reappeared with a hammer. If you're going to be so careless with your things, you shouldn't have them at all. He grabbed the rest of the figurines off the dresser and placed them on the floor. Then he started to smash them to pieces one by one with the hammer. No, Dad, please stop! Scootaloo cried, but he ignored her. Once all the figurines were shattered, he stalked out of the room without another word. Crying, Scootaloo cleaned up the mess. If her father was going to start being cruel to her as well, she just didn't know how she was going to cope. To comfort herself, Scootaloo drew a picture of her family, making them all smile and happy in front of their home, coloring in the scene with her crayons. After school, she went to play with her friends. She listened enviously as Applebloom talked about how her and her sister had fun plans that weekend. She wished her family was like her friend of what had happened this morning. She stayed with her friends as long as she could, crusading as they always did. That night after dinner, she couldn't find her picture anywhere. She left her room and went in the kitchen. Has anyone seen my picture? I threw it away, her father said. You just left it lying on the floor, and we told you to keep your room clean. Something inside Scootaloo suddenly snapped. How dare you go into my room and throw away my things? Scootaloo yelled. How would you like it if I did that to you? She kept yelling as she got into her father's face. Her head suddenly snapped to the side as her father slapped her, and she staggered backwards. Her father had never hit her before. Suddenly, bubbling rage crashed over her. She wasn't going to let her father get away with hitting her. She slapped him back, but being too little to reach his face, she slapped him across the shoulder. Scootaloo! She heard her mother scream at her before she was whirled around. Her mother slapped her across the face several times. Go to your room! Screw you! Scootaloo screamed back. Her mother grabbed her and threw her on the couch, holding her down as she furiously slapped her face, forelegs, chest, and everywhere else she could reach. Scootaloo tried to push her away, but her mother was too strong. It wasn't long before she was crying, then screaming at the top of her lungs. Cold Heart, that's enough! Let her go! Her father shouted. What the buck is going on in here? A voice suddenly yelled. Scootaloo would know that voice anywhere. Rainbow Dash. Chapter 4. It Shouldn't Hurt to be a Child. Their window had been halfway open to let cool air in. Scootaloo's mother didn't even seem to hear Rainbow Dash and kept slapping Scootaloo, but only for a moment before Rainbow had opened the window all the way and flew in, tackling Cold Heart off her daughter. Her father was frozen in shock as Rainbow punched his wife in the jaw hard enough to knock her out.
"What is wrong with you?"
Rainbow yelled at Cloud Dancer.
"Why would you let your wife beat her like that?"
Her father cowered.
"Oh, save it!"
Rainbow bucked him in the head and knocked him out as well before grabbing the still sobbing Scootaloo, flying out the window with her to safety. Scootaloo just clung to her. She couldn't stop crying, but she was relieved. After a few minutes, Rainbow Dash landed in front of Twilight's treehouse and banged on the door. After a moment, Twilight had opened it, and her jaw dropped when she saw Scootaloo.
"What in Equestria happened?"
"I caught her mother beating her. Can we come in?"
"What? Sure, of course,"
Twilight stammered, moving aside. The other members of the Elements of Harmony looked up at Rainbow words in shock. They had been invited over for dinner.
"What in tarnation happened, Rainbow?"
Applejack demanded.
"I was flying over our house when I heard screaming. I landed and looked in the window, and Cold Heart had her pressed against the couch and was hitting her over and over."
The others gasped.
"Oh no, how horrible!"
Fluttershy whimpered.
"Disgraceful!"
said Rarity angrily.
"How could she do such a thing?"
Pinky's mane and tail deflated. Applejack was stunned and speechless. Family meant more to her than anything in the world. She couldn't even imagine someone treating their filly like that. Bruises were already starting to form on Scootaloo, and they all could see it. Hearing the others' opinions helped her calm down and stop crying, though she still couldn't help shivering. Twilight got a blanket and covered her with it.
"Scootaloo, is this the first time your mother has hurt you?"
Rainbow asked her gently. Scootaloo shuddered and didn't answer.
"Even once is one time too many, Rainbow,"
Applejack snarled.
"I know, but we need to know the details so we can have them put away,"
Rainbow explained, and Applejack nodded grimly in understanding.
"Please, talk to us, Scootaloo. Are you afraid we won't believe you?"
Twilight asked, looking at her sadly. Scootaloo shrugged. Rainbow remembered how her mother had used to calm her down when she was scared, when she was a filly. She started singing softly to the nervous foal. Listening to the singing, gradually Scootaloo started to relax. She looked all around her at the caring and sympathetic faces before she took a deep breath and let it out slowly before looking up to her hero, Rainbow Dash.
"It all started when I was 5 years old."
After hearing the full story of everything Scootaloo had been through, the others were furious. Twilight immediately wrote a letter to the princess to tell her what was going on.
"Dear Princess Celestia, I regret to inform you that I and the other elements have discovered that Scootaloo is being abused by her parents for the past 3 years. Rainbow Dash heard her screams and went in to investigate, discovering her mother beating her. After talking with Scootaloo and hearing the details, I believe she is being abused mentally, emotionally, and a few times physically. Rainbow Dash has offered to take care of Scootaloo for the time being, but I know you will probably want to take her parents into custody. Your faithful student, Twilight Sparkle." Twilight woke Spike up so he could send the letter. He was horrified when he found out what had happened. It was only a minute before Spike burped and a squirrel appeared.
"Dear Twilight, thank you for making this atrocity known to me. I will have the royal guards come and arrest Scootaloo's parents at once. In the meantime, please take Scootaloo to the hospital where she can be examined and evidence can be collected. I will meet you there shortly. Signed, Princess Celestia of Equestria." At the hospital, Scootaloo was examined, and it was found that, except for being bruised, she was all right physically. When the princess arrived, she questioned the filly as gently as possible. Scootaloo told her everything. Her parents were both arrested that very night, and at her request, Princess Celestia gave Rainbow Dash temporary custody of Scootaloo. Rainbow took the filly home, where, feeling traumatized and exhausted, she soon fell asleep. and for once she had no bad dreams. The next day, her friends found out what happened, and Apple Bloom and Sweetie Belle did their best to try to comfort their friend. "Why didn't you tell us what was going on?" Apple Bloom asked.
"Yeah, we would have helped you,"
Sweetie Belle nodded.
"I guess I was too scared to. Dad told me it was nobody else's business,"
Scootaloo said softly. "If they were hurting you, it's definitely our business," declared Apple Bloom. "You're our best friend."
"Yeah, friends forever!"
Sweetie Belle hugged Scootaloo and Apple Bloom joined her.
"Thanks, you guys."
Scootaloo managed a small but heartfelt smile. Her parents' trial was to be held in a few days. Scootaloo wasn't sure to think about that. Rainbow Dash told her that her parents were bad and deserved to be in jail, but Scootaloo still loved her parents despite what they had done. She wasn't sure she wanted them in jail. She was glad that they were away from her and couldn't hurt her anymore, though. Twilight had strongly suggested for Rainbow Dash that she put Scootaloo in therapy. "She's bound to have plenty of emotional scars, Rainbow, and it will help her heal." Rainbow had finally agreed. Scootaloo's therapist was an orange unicorn with a blonde mane and tail. She reminded her of Applejack in the way she looked, except that she had a yellow, smiley face as her cutie mark. "Hello, Scootaloo. My name's Dr. Sunny Smile, but you may call me Dr. Sunny for short. Do you know why you're here?"
"Because my parents were mean to me."
"Well, yes, in a way. Talking about what happened, can you make us feel better? Can tell me anything you like." Scootaloo hesitated, thinking, and finally ended up telling her the story about Peaches and the puppies. "I don't know what kind of mean vet would kill healthy puppies." She sniffled when she was done, wiping away the tears. Dr. Sunny looked sympathetic. "I don't either. I'm so sorry that happened to you."
"Dr. Sunny?"
"Yes?"
"Do you think dogs go to heaven?"
Dr. Sunny gave her a sad smile. "Yes, Scootaloo, I do." Scootaloo felt a little better. Epilogue. Upon finding out that her aunt and uncle knew about the abuse and had the gall to blame Scootaloo for it and then do nothing, they were required to be at the trial. Her mother lied and claimed she had done nothing beyond what Rainbow had seen, but her father broke down on the stand, crying and apologizing. He confessed everything that both he and his wife had done, including how his wife was also cruel to him. "I'm so sorry, Scootaloo. I just snapped that day from all the pressure and took it out on you. Please forgive me." Scootaloo nodded at her. He'd always been kind to her before that night. Her mother was sentenced to a minimum of 10 years for child abuse. Her aunt and uncle were sentenced to a year for conspiracy to commit child abuse. For cooperating, her father was given 6 months probation, as long as he attended therapy, but he lost custody of Scootaloo as well. He would be allowed supervised visits to her only. Rainbow Dash was awarded permanent custody of Scootaloo, a fact which overjoyed them both. Cold Heart glared at her daughter the entire time, and so did her aunt and uncle. It made Scootaloo nervous. "Don't worry, Scoots. They're all getting what they deserve," Rainbow assured her. That night, having a quiet dinner with Rainbow at home, Scootaloo accidentally knocked over her juice and automatically froze and started to shake, remembering what her mother would have done. Rainbow was already mopping up the spill with a paper towel, but she looked up when she heard a whimper and saw the way Scootaloo was staring at her. She immediately pulled Scootaloo to the floor with her gently, wrapping a ring around her. "Shh, it's okay. I know it was just an accident." Snapping out of it, Scootaloo fully realized for the first time that she was actually safe. She smiled timidly at Rainbow, and at her soft smile in response. It soon turned into a delighted grin.
"I'll help clean it up,"
she said cheerfully. "Here you go, my little helper," Rainbow chuckled, handing her a paper towel. Scootaloo felt her heart soar as she helped Rainbow clean up the spill. At long last, she was truly home.